Welcome to episode 10 of the WPCampus podcast, a podcast for those using WordPress in higher education. When we talk about WordPress in higher ed, we often talk about technology, themes and plugins, server configurations, and so on. But at some point, the developers have to let go of their websites, and the content creators take over. In higher ed, that brings with it a whole new set of challenges. My name is Brian DeConinck. I'm joined by my colleague at NC State, Jen McFarland, and by Shelley Keith, Director of Digital Communications at University of Mary Washington. Shelley presented at the 2016 WPCampus conference on the topic, We Don't Need No Education, Web Governance Through On-Demand Online Training. Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, I mentioned this before when we were communicating over Slack. I did not actually attend your talk, and Jen was not in Sarasota, so...
This is basically just an excuse to get her to do it for you again.
Yeah, that's basically it. So, so could you give a quick overview of everything you talked about?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. It's really basically kind of a from the beginning conversation about what I found when I took the position at UMW when I arrived on campus, and kind of how I addressed those problems, how I talked about that to leadership, and kind of the progress that we've made since then. I talk a little bit about what we're calling the Strategic Redevelopment Initiative, where we're completely rebuilding the website based on a content strategy initiative that we have completed, and the governance piece that's kind of come out of that and what that looks like. So that's basically the entire presentation.
All right.
In a nutshell.
So in terms of governance, what was the governance situation like before you started this?
Well, it was the Wild West, and in a lot of ways it kind of still is. UMW is a place where WordPress is kind of in our blood, right? I got there, and for years, we're the home of DTLT and the UMW Blogs Initiative. When I got there, Jim Groom had done an amazing job of kind of integrating WordPress into the academic culture of the institution, and it had been turned into, we had migrated a couple years before I got there off of Contribute and into WordPress. Mm-hmm. So the how to use the tool has not been my problem. It's very much been kind of figuring out the why and doing things for reasons, and cleaning up what the result of that Contribute migration was, because it was a straight migration of years of content straight over into WordPress, with no like real content strategy process around that. And there's never been any kind of real governance on the website aside from like restricted to specific templates. You only get one theme, that kind of thing. And that's been the extent of like of web governance at UMW. And so there's a lot of issues that come from. There are a lot of issues that come from that, right? And when we hooked up Site Improve, we were able to see all these accessibility problems, all of these the spelling errors and the broken links and the content that hadn't been updated, the files that had existed in their current form since 1998 had never been touched. You can see all of that stuff in reports, and when I took that to cabinet, the president was just like, fix it, just fix it, whatever it is, just fix it. So that was kind of the beginning of this whole thing.
That's a good point, though, because for us, or at least I know in our group, we spend a lot of time, talking about how to teach people to use WordPress. But you're right; it's somewhat intuitive. We moved from Drupal, and so for a lot of our users, WordPress was a huge, happy turnaround. But in all those efforts to train on WordPress, we sometimes forget to talk about, the issues with the actual content that you're putting in there. It's easy enough to use, but are you even using it right?
Yeah, that's really, and when we did the content strategy portion, when we started that, we brought in a consultant to do a lot of that legwork with us, and we did these stakeholder interviews across campus, this like wide cross-section of campus. That was 2 days worth of conversations with different groups, and one of the things that I heard kind of nonstop was I don't know what's good. I don't know what's right. I don't know, like, I heard all kinds of complaints over the course of months about the search engine results, the internal search engine results, and just all kinds of things. I heard some complaining about the templates in the tool, but that was really kind of tertiary at best, right? What I was hearing from people was, I want to know how to do things better and get better results. And so that was really a driver too for us to take a hard look at the how, at the why versus the how.
Mm-hmm. So in your presentation, which I did look through the slides even though I wasn't there, you share a document, well, a bunch of documents outlining everything that you've done in terms of your training program and the structure of how you approach all of this. And one of the things you say is that you wanted to give your website managers like a solid toolbox and a shared vocabulary, just so that everybody would be on the same page. What kind of impact has that had? Have you found like it's easier to understand what people are asking for? Have you found that support calls go quicker?
Well, there's a tiered answer to that. One, I have a really limited sample size to work with right now. We rolled out training on August 1st. So I've got probably a couple dozen admins who have now, are site managers who've now gone through this process, and I've gotten some kind of anecdotal feedback from them, and I have seen that the questions that they've asked have been more kind of targeted, and they're more aware of what they're asking. Which is amazing. One of the next pieces of this is we're going to start doing a post-training survey and try to get some more like quantitative, like happiness levels and understanding where they feel like things are lacking and that kind of thing. I did run a 6-month trial with various groups, and the truth is I feel like no news is good news in a lot of this. Like I haven't gotten significant complaints. I have stopped hearing from a lot of these people that I heard from a lot at that point. So I feel like that they've been a little bit more empowered, and I need to kind of verify that and do some outreach. But I'm at this point calling it pretty successful based on all the feedback that I got with the trial group and the feedback that I've gotten so far. But none of that is, I don't have data right now that shows that this has been, successful because of X, Y, and Z. But I'm pretty confident that it's coming. It's been good so far.
And so, how did you, since I guess you were going from a Wild West to something more structured, how did you decide, like, you could spend all day every day talking about the ins and outs of all these different tools and the right way to do this, the wrong way to do that. How did you decide what to prioritize and what fit into this program and what didn't?
Really, I kind of tied a lot of that to what we can support and have been supporting, and what the bulk of our support requests coming in have been about, right? And then I tied it to what their desired outcomes are. So talking about exactly which tools to decide to do conversation about, this was all about how basic can we get a training program that begins to touch on kind of all the things that they need to know. And really the goal has been, I want them to understand that there are whys, but not necessarily be experts in any of those things. Just like I want them to understand that there are good ways to do things in WordPress, but not necessarily be WordPress experts, right? So we're kind of, there's a lot of scratching the surface here, where the goal is to introduce a training program that makes them aware of and accountable for the 90% of what comes through that is the very most basic information that they need to have. Understanding that there are standards and best practices, understanding that there are compliance issues, understanding that they are in the control of their search engine results for their internal content. It's not this black magic box that I can fix, right? So
no, it's so much better when you just tell them it's black magic.
It's voodoo, and it's on me. But you know, getting people to just be aware of those things and kind of understand that in the context of that, there's a couple of things that you need to know about. You need to understand that WordPress is where the website lives. You need to understand that Site Improve is where our governance information comes from, our qualitative, or I mean our quality assurance content, and also where they have access to analytics and a bunch of other stuff. And we just kind of went, this is what we can train on that will actually solve problems for us, because everything else that we use, I kind of decided that additional training on that at this phase would cause more problems than it would solve.
Yeah.
So I worked really hard to weed out those things that were going to cause more problems than they were going to solve.
Shelley, can you give us some background on that Site Improve, since you've mentioned it a couple times, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it.
I mean, do you want to know what it is or how we're using it?
Sure. Yes.
Site Improve is this really phenomenal. It's got, I don't even know how to. It's my precious, and you can't have it. It is. It's got quality assurance information in there, so it's broken links and spelling errors. It gives page scores and it, based on those kinds of those things, broken links, spelling errors, that kind of thing. It does gives some analytics data. It's pretty robust analytics data, but it also ties like number of pages that within the site that are linked to a given page and number of visits during a specific period to a given page, and it gives you all this in kind of a single place in a way that lets you understand okay, this page has problems, and there are thousands of people looking at it every week or day or whatever, versus this page down here has problems, and it's got 3 visits in the last month. I'm not even, like, this is not my priority. So it really does do a good job of kind of helping us prioritize things as well. It's got a policy feature, which means basically that's a tool that lets me. We just had a president change. So now I can create a policy to search for the old president's name and alert me anytime it's found, so that I can pull a report and make sure that everywhere that it is somewhere that it belongs, right? So that it's a news thing, it's an old blog post, is something that doesn't say our current president is the last guy, right? So it's those kinds of things. I can also do reports on things like files that haven't been updated or downloaded in however long. So I can see those things from 1988 that are just archived on the website, because that's what that's for. And it just gives me a lot of information that I can use to help to continue moving forward on improving. So is this a plugin? Everything. No, it's a third-party service.
Dang it, I want it.
It's amazing.
So I guess that's my next question then. You know, there are WordPress plugins that do pieces of all of that.
Yeah.
Could you imagine doing something like what you're doing with just sort of a collection of free plugins and you just sort of know how they all fit together? Or do you think it's really important to have that single product suite that does everything for you?
I'm getting a lip quiver. Because do I think it's possible? Yes. Do I think that it makes things much, much harder in this case? Yes. We're running, one of the things that we're dealing with is we're kind of running a bifurcated site. So we're running one site on the new site that everything is slowly migrating to, is on WP Engine, and that presents, it's amazing, but it presents some limitations with the tools that you can add, right? And then the old site is on an enterprise provider that we're already a little bit pushing the limits of what they can support, right? So any additional plugins and data storage and all of that stuff inside the system that's not really the way that I want to take us right now. That's not to say that we couldn't at some, because Site Improve is not cheap. So it's not to say that that's not a direction that we could go when some of these other problems are solved, but we're not in a place where that's really practical. And having all that stuff in one place and have it relate the way that it does in Site Improve is more valuable than I can say. To be able to keep digging into a report and look at all of those pieces together for a given blog site inside the network is really invaluable. And SiteImprove is the place, and I think there's a question down about this later, but when we go through the kickoff for a content strategy process for any given site that we're starting to move over to the new network, SiteImprove is the starting place. It provides an inventory of the site and all of the requisite data that I need to start making a case for all of the changes that need to happen. And it gives me a place to start having some of those conversations about the internal versus external value. The number of visits to a page I kind of equate to external value versus the number of links within the whole site to that page I kind of equate to internal value, so that we can start talking about what their priorities are and what's important. So yeah, it's my favorite thing.
So I think you're making Jen a little bit jealous.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Yeah, focus back on the.
So one of the things I think I saw in your materials, one of the things that SiteImprove gives you data on is accessibility, right? And you do have accessibility as one of these sort of core topics that you're training your users on. And I guess I'm curious to hear what you talk about and how you talk about it, because in my experience, a lot of our users want to do the right thing. They want to have accessible websites, but they don't really have the habits or the knowledge to be able to do that. And I'm wondering, like, what do you emphasize and how do you build those long-term habits that you need to have?
That's a really great question. The accessibility video is the longest one in that series of videos. By a lot. I don't know if you've looked at the list, but most of those videos are under 10 minutes. And most of them are under 5, right? We do very brief bites of what we need to tell you. But the accessibility video is almost 20 minutes. And I kind of frame it with, I pulled in 2 other videos, one from an accessibility expert who allowed me to cut his video into mine. And he talks about why accessibility is important. And how it matters in kind of the broader world. And we're a liberal arts school, so to be able to talk about accessibility as a function of kind of the democratic distribution of knowledge was an important piece for me, right? And then I kind of talk about some kind of practical accessibility things about alt tags and just some very basic kind of stuff about how you can't embed text in an image and stick it up on the web, and that's totally fine, right? So it's just some very, very basics. And then I cut in another video that is, her name is Colleen, and I suddenly can't remember, but she does the Blind Inspiration podcast, and she's a blind user, and she did an example of her using a screen reader to navigate a site, and I cut that in after this conversation about all these things that she talks about. I cut that in to show them things like why. This is exactly why. This is a very powerful illustration of why you can't use click here everywhere.
That's a great idea. It's always so impactful when somebody hears that for the first time.
Right. Well, exactly. And those are the kinds of things, like the pushback. One of the questions that you've asked about is about pushback, and the only real pushback I've gotten is from there are stakeholders on campus who are just so used to certain behaviors that they are kind of defending them to the death. I want click here because my users don't know that it's a link unless I tell them to click here. And I'm like, you're wrong, and here's why. And I need to, but I understand that kind of cling, the desire to hold on to the things that you know, and to what this person really wants is to make things as easy as possible on her users, and I understand that. But really demonstrating that's kind of misguided, and that there are better ways to do that is a really important, valuable thing. So that's kind of I felt like we can say accessibility and we can say compliance and we can say required and lawsuit, and I can talk about that, and that works really, really well at the cabinet level. But when I'm down in the trenches talking to site managers, getting them to understand that there are really solid user-focused reasons to do something different than what they've been doing in the past is the only way to really communicate that to them. It has to be powerful, and it has to be enough to change behaviors.
And I really like, in your presentation, you have a slide that's called the Governance Bill of Rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like you have the rights of your web managers, and then you also have the rights of their users.
Mm-hmm.
And those rights of their users, really that's you telling them what you want them to do, what you're getting out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But you're framing it in a very user-centric way. I love that slide a lot.
Thank you. It's one of my favorites. And it's really, I did that because I wanted to put a human face on the work that we're asking them to do. And when I talk about the site manager's rights, what I'm saying to them is, this is what I'm here for. I am here to help you with these things. And that's part of that is kind of self-protectionist. It's a little bit of a insulation from kind of the day-to-day, like the things that they are having to manage because we're a distributed authorship model and because we don't have an enormous staff to support their regular operations with their website, especially if they're a high-volume, kind of constant change environment. But to let them know, like, we are really here to support you with these things, and we will do everything we can to make this as easy as we can on you so that you can deliver this experience to your users. Mm-hmm. And I think one of my favorite pieces of that is they should have access to support that they should never need. And that to me is kind of the crux of everything. Like, and I think that that's really important for me to deliver too, is here's some training that will give you the strengths that you need to do 95% of what you need to do. But I'm here for you should you need additional help. Right?
Yeah, I love that sentiment.
How do you support your web managers? Do they just come to you, or does it go through like the IT help desk? What kind of a system do you have?
They come to us. We have a ticket system. We just, every email that comes through, we just kind of churn into the ticket system. We have, I don't know if you've visited the UMW website, but there's a link on the very bottom of every page of the site. This is report a problem. Mm-hmm. Which is a bit of a blunt instrument idea and a way of approaching it, but it's really, really effective. And so between the reporter problems and the emails that come directly from site managers, we do a really good job of directing traffic. So the problems that come in go to the appropriate site managers, and then the site manager difficulties that come in turn into tickets, and we just support that with whatever we have and however we do. And it's basically all on us. Every once in a while, something will go through the IT help desk, and I'm in a conversation right now with our help desk, with our support owner, our support manager, to look at maybe offloading some of the normal, regular 90% day-to-day stuff that does come into us off to them. But right now, we own all of the web support.
And I guess I know Jen and I talked a little about this.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm most interested in hearing you talk about all this is doing something like that here at NC State.
Yeah.
And UMW has about 5,000 students,
mm-hmm.
and NC State has about 35,000 students.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like, not to call UMW small, but they're...
And we are. It's okay.
But I am really interested in, do you have any ideas on, like, how some of what you're doing would scale to a much larger institution, you know, that many more hands, you know...
Basically, we need you to tell us how we can do our jobs.
Yeah.
Well, we're a pretty small institution, but I've got 250 content managers, mm-hmm. right? So that's not a small number compared
right.
to how many faculty and staff we actually have, right? So, and really, this governance model is a lot more about empowering people to do good work than it is about trying to be the web police. And I think that it's really dependent on what your culture is and what your bandwidth is. What is your ability to support users? And we're really putting all of the, like, my goal is to I just lost my word because it happens all the time, but it's to make them accountable and empower them to do the right thing. So I have a hard time feeling like that wouldn't be something that would be a goal anywhere.
Right.
But then and if you're able to train away a huge number of your hows and your whys, then you're reducing your workload. So it just makes a lot of sense to me, even if there are other layers in that process, or you have more workflows and those kinds of things. We have no workflow, and anybody who has access to the website has access to the website. We are limiting, and there's some of that's changing. The new site, they don't have admin level access to anything. We've cut out access to widgets and menus and themes and setup stuff and some other things. So they have access to content, G-form, Gravity Forms, things that are tied to managing their content, right? I'm not letting the inmates run the asylum on this side the way that it's done on our old site. Anybody who has admin access has a full admin access, but part of this process is kind of weeding out some of the bad behaviors that have taken over there. So anyway, the point is, I think that really depends on your culture.
Right.
But I think that it also really depends on what your resources are. Because this model makes the most sense when you're in a scenario where you are overtasked and under-resourced, which is exactly where we're sitting.
So, I'm going to detour a second and tell you about what we do, and just for the purposes of giving that other perspective, and that is we don't do anything, really. I mean, we do a little bit. So when we have large sites, like, for example, our Division of Academic and Student Affairs has one multi-site. There's like 60 sites on there. HR just launched. They've got like a dozen or so sites on there. And within those multi-sites, we'll have what we call publishing help, and there are some guidelines that are similar to this in those individual multi-sites. What we don't have is some overarching structure for all of our clients. We have some best practices out on the web that people can refer to. We have basic video tutorials for some stuff, although that's just basically use WordPress, not guidelines. But this is something that I know I speak for Brian and I both here, that we're very concerned about, and probably a big part of the reason why Brian wanted you to come and talk to us is because we know that we need to do this better. I don't necessarily think that we can solve all of our problems for campus, because we're just one group, and there's even a communications group that is really completely separate from us and decides a lot of these things too. So I'm not sure how we reconcile that, but I know we can be doing better.
And that's kind of where I came in. When I walked in the UMW with the issues that existed, I just knew that we had to do something to do better. And that meant not just do better as far as the end result, but do better by our users, because they were kind of floundering, right? And by that I mean our web managers. There were a lot of people with access to the site who had absolutely no idea what to do with it. So
give everyone access to, by the way, since you mentioned that, we don't really stifle that. I mean, the nice thing about WordPress is, hey, revision history, but we do a bit of a disservice to folks as well.
Yeah. And that was my thinking too, which is one of the reasons that when I did the, hold on, I have to go find the name of it because I have no words, the Expectations and Best Practices lesson, that was part of that whole process, like understanding that as an admin on a website or as a site manager on a website, you're required to and responsible for specific behaviors. You are expected to do certain things, and you're agreeing to do those things by continuing this training. And those are things that they've at that point already seen, and that's the last piece before they hit WordPress training. But just starting to build that up and give people, and here's one of the things. There are a huge number of our site managers who are other duties as assigned, right? They are, it's most of our users, right? So they are admins or faculty who got stuck on the committee, and now they're the person dealing with the site. and they don't really want to be there. But I wanted to do two things with how we framed this. I wanted to empower them, and I think I've said this a couple of times, but I really wanted to empower them to understand how to think about their content and what they're trying to accomplish, right? And then I also wanted to make sure that there was a level of accountability. And the accountability piece for me is not, I'm about to come blame you for something, but it's to also empower them to maybe push back against an upper level boss, their dean, who wants a thing. I want a thing, I want a thing, I want a thing. Mm-hmm. And this person has not only now had the training that says this is maybe not the right thing, but also understands where their support comes from, i.e. me. I will go sit down with the dean and tell them no for you. But they also have a level of accountability. Like, we're doing revision. We actually have all of our revisions on the new site are backing up into GitHub, which is awesome. Yeah. But we have I have a permanent record of the changes that you're making, and if we get an accessibility lawsuit or we get a copyright problem, right, and I come back to this page and see that you're the one that made that change, you're the one whose name I'm referring to legal counsel. You know what I mean? Like, so they need to understand that the push that they get from above to do a thing that's maybe not okay is not going to result in that person that's above them that's doing the pushing being the one called to court. It's going to be them. So giving them the power to go, let's have a conversation about this, because it's a bigger issue than just what you want.
They've been assigned that task. Giving them the power and the information that they can actually do it right is extremely important. Right,
and that's where I wanted to come in, because and the kind of the grand scheme of all of this is when I got there, I have no way to say no to a lot of things. Right, and luckily I've been able to tie a lot of things that came in that were bad ideas to accessibility. So I had a compliance tie to that, so that I could rework that. But I didn't have a lot. I wasn't empowered, even as the organizational owner of the website. I wasn't empowered to make sure that we were doing the right things. And because you can't get them to do the right thing if they don't know what the right thing is. So I had to put together something that said, here's how this needs to work. So now you've been trained on that, and here's what that means to you. Here are your expectations and best practices, and this is what you're agreeing to. And now, as I'm getting all that launched out, we're building out that piece that gives me the power to find a problem on the website when it happens and be like, you know better than this.
Right. The bar is this high. Get above it.
Stop it. So yeah, it's a kind of a multi-layered, like, we did this for a lot of reasons and there's a lot wrapped up in it, but it's all really intentional.
So Shelley, to lay the smack down.
Hold on.
Oh. We have a technical issue.
I have a technical issue. I knew I was going to do that as soon as I put this in today.
You got so excited.
I did. I got so excited, and I totally talked with my hands.
So I was going to ask, how do you deal with your overachievers, your ones who think they already know how to do everything and maybe respect their own judgment more than yours?
We call them faculty.
I wasn't going to say that because someone might watch this. Here's the deal with that. I don't have a lot of those on the new site, which is really where this governance, where the training and governance piece comes in right now. And we're not really, the old site's still Wild West. Mm-hmm. So anybody who comes in and wants to do XYZ crazy thing, we don't have the resources to support them. So a lot of times, depending on what it is, we'll send them to our Division of Teaching and Learning with Technologies, and they do a bunch of stuff with WordPress, so it doesn't get to live on the EDU, and it's a separate thing, right? So if this is really what you want to do, you gotta go talk to them because we can't help you. And there are departments that are doing some kind of out there stuff within the realm of, and they're really within the limits of what they can do within WordPress the way we've set it up for them, because we don't support those extra pieces.
Right.
But there are some of those, and really I just kind of let it go. I'm just kind of like, let it out into the universe, and this is not something that I can do something about right now, and it's not a hill I want to die on. So I for the most part just let them be. When we start to do the content strategy process and start to move them over as we get spaces set up for all of these, we'll go through the whole, we have a very specific, very well done functioning process for redeveloping sites into the new version of Word, or to the new setup. Excuse me. And that's when I'll fight that fight. Mm-hmm. And that's when we will really address and figure out what their need really is and how we can best deliver. Because I work really hard not to be like, no, we're not, no. But there's also, I feel like a lot of those issues as we've been migrating users have been really solved by honest conversations about what the department thinks it needs versus what the user is actually needing, and how they reconcile that, and where useful ends and ego begins. So there's a lot of those conversations that happen in the process of kind of rethinking and redeveloping sites strategically.
Unfortunately, sometimes that's the only time you can have that conversation.
Yes, exactly. Which is why there's absolutely not one site moving, like just getting picked up and moved over.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Every single one of those has to go through this process with us, because a big chunk of them, because of the way the old server and the old site is set up, it's a really kind of highly customized WordPress install versus moving over to WP Engine. It's not an apples to apples thing. We don't have a lot of choices in that, which has been awesome because it means I can be like, I'll put you on the calendar for next fall. Mm-hmm.
So I guess there's sort of multiple components to this then. There's your online training, but then there are these conversations about migrating from your old site to your new site. I'm guessing that happens in person, those conversations?
Yeah.
That was an ominous laugh.
Well, because it's, I've been really thinking about working on developing or redeveloping or kind of repurposing some of the training that we've done, because that training is for the sites that have already been moved over, right? It's for people who've already been through the conversations about content strategy and all of that stuff, and we've already finished the process with them and they're ready to go live. I need to look at releasing a different component of that helps existing site managers on the old network prep their sites for migration and really start to rethink their content themselves, maybe without my direct intervention and without some of those conversations, to get it in a place where it's stronger and more ready to get moved over, so that maybe we can speed this process up a little bit. But I haven't figured that out yet. Like, I haven't figured out how to introduce some of these concepts and not be in the room for all the questions that happen because of it. So it's kind of I would really like to be able to just shove out a training that lets people just start to churn this themselves.
Right.
But I haven't figured that out yet.
Well, the timing's not always with you either. Like, I actually had a conversation with someone about that this morning, that, for us, in this case, we have a lot of work. We're not going to be able to start working with this client for 4 to 6 weeks. So you can say, hey, this is the time for you to do your homework and start thinking about how the process should go for you, what you as an organization needs, talk about it internally. A lot of times, though, people show up at our door and there's already some timeline to it, and that crunch doesn't always allow us to, be as strategic as we want to be.
Right. Well, that's the great thing about, because I'm any new site development that I work on goes into the new stuff, but a lot of times if there's a time crunch component, it's something outside of what we can take on as workload, because that old site still exists, I can be like, I can give you a blank site and you can do what you want. And that relieves a lot of pressure for us right there, right? It's terrifying, but it's just one of the things that I've just had to kind of go, you know what, not my circus, not my monkeys. There's not anything I can do about this right now. I have to, and things have to keep happening. I can't shut down day-to-day operations of the university because this is wrong. So we have to find a way to deliver or to allow them to do it themselves. And that's been kind of our answer is, if you really need this and you really need it before we can really work with you, then you feel free to do whatever you need to over here in this space. And that keeps things going, and it kind of tones down on some of the angst against us that happens kind of invariably.
I'm going to have to knit a pillow that says, not my circus, not my monkeys.
I think I have to give that one to Robin Smale. I think that's her mantra.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, moving away from circuses and monkeys.
No, we're in higher ed. There's no.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe actually heading deeper into the circus. So, I guess you've talked about trying to empower your site managers, but part of this, I guess it sounds like all of this is only possible because of some support you're getting from above you, right? Mm-hmm. Your own institutional support. Can you talk a little about how your bosses view this whole project of yours? Do they think you're crazy for trying, or
no, nobody does. At least they haven't said it to my face. so there's that. It's one of the things that when I was making the case for a redevelopment initiative, and this was before, and I tell this story in the presentation, but basically, when I got there and I started talking about the content strategy stuff and started really understanding what some of the problems were at the institution and kind of nailing down that those were really content problems and not design or infrastructure problems, right? That meant that, and they really kind of boiled down to process and governance and training. When I was having those conversations, I did a lot of storytelling to tie kind of the bottom line and the problems that I was reporting and the things that the president was choking on to the fact that this was a content problem and it was a training issue and that we needed to address this as kind of a much more kind of fundamental underlying problem that a redesign or a making it shiny wasn't going to solve. And what I say in the presentation is we couldn't landscape the hoarder house and expect positive results. And that's exactly what it would have aligned to. And so one of the things that I admitted is that I spent a lot of time saying mandatory training, and it just became this accepted thing. No, I never asked permission to do mandatory training. I don't ask permission to do a lot of things, but I feel like that's why I've been put in this position. That's why they brought me in, was to do the right thing. And there are places where I go, we have a choice, and I need somebody to kind of assess and decide which direction we want to go. But for the most part, there's a lot of stuff that comes up in my job where I feel like this is my job, is to make this decision and move this forward. And so I did that. I said mandatory training, and Vice President's just nodded. Yeah, it's a good idea. Stewardship is important, and do what? I didn't hear that.
It became mandatory.
Yes. You tell a story often enough, it becomes the truth.
I like it.
And that was really the key. And so I never got any pushback from above, and that became. I'm about to hurt myself. That became cabinet approval, right, and conversations going below. And so it really kind of was, if the cabinet had a problem with it, they would have said so in the numerous meetings I had with them. So, and that was just, and I'm able to defend. Like, if I have to go sit down in front of somebody who really wants to argue against this, I'd probably spend most of the time looking at them like they were crazy. Like, why is this a bad thing? It's 2-hour training, and we're in an environment where we're just outside DC, and I don't know what you guys have to deal with, but we've got IT security training, we've got sexual harassment training, I have training on our time management site system because I'm a supervisor, I've got training on sexual harassment because I'm a supervisor. I have training on managing student aids because I'm a like I have all of these trainings that are required of us. So wedging one more in there, and it's a 2-hour training and not a multi-day extravaganza, is a total bonus. And being able to do it online meant that I don't have to worry about schedules, and I don't have to worry about distractions, and I don't have to stand in the classroom and worry about that one person that's going to interrupt and question everything and is going to, be a problem for everyone in the class because faculty.
And online makes it a reference for all the people who attended and can't remember but know it's important, and for people like Brian and I who want to steal it and use it at our
by all means, please do. Yeah, exactly, and it means that when I get kind of a critical mass and can start doing open labs, which is one of kind of my next steps, because there does need to be some human interaction involved. I've got people who are coming with that baseline knowledge and able to have conversations with me and with each other that kind of lift us all up. So my goal with all of this is to kind of build this culture that just continuously lifts all the ships in the harbor to where they need to be. And so, the online was, I think it's the only way to deliver in this environment where we're a staff of 2. It's me and a developer. You may know that guy. I don't know. But
you're talking about Curtis?
I'm talking about Curtis.
Yeah.
But that guy, who is my lifesaver. But, there's just the 2 of us. There's only so much that we can do. So this was a much more effective delivery method than trying to do like monthly courses or one-on-ones, which is what we had been doing, was kind of some one-on-ones. And we're still building out like knowledge-based stuff and all kinds of other things, but here's your core, here's your baseline, right? Mm-hmm. Do this, and then we'll worry about everything, all the outlier stuff that you need. Here's your first part. And that, I'm so excited that it's done.
Well, I think that leads to a really horrible question for me to ask you, which is what comes next?
Well, that was what I've released is really the basic training, right? It's kind of doing web at UMW 101. Mm-hmm. The next piece, I've got some advanced training planned. I've got the outline for that in the slides that I think you will link to as part of this. And it's a lot more about how to use certain things. There's some kind of advanced WordPress stuff, like how to use Gravity Forms and how to set it up right and how to fix your notifications so the webmaster isn't getting emails about every single form that gets submitted in your environment. and how to use TablePress and how to interact. We've built some custom tools and how to use those and what they're for. And we built some custom post types and custom interfaces for our different departments to really support their specific needs. And so I'm going to build training about exactly how to use those for those departments. So as they onboard new people, I'm not having to do, we can just be like, here's the video for how to use that. Let us know if you have any problems, right? So we can kind of build this repository of knowledge that helps keep things moving. This is also really great because we regularly have every fall semester you get 300 new faculty members on a committee, and so that site needs to be updated because they all need to have edit access for whatever reason. And there's a chunk of them that email me and go, I don't know how to use WordPress. I need you to come show me. So there's some me being able to just kind of ship this email out and be like, here's 2-hour training, have fun. And we also allow student aides to work on websites all over the place. So instead of me getting an ulcer and staying up at night about what they're doing to my website, I now can send training, and they have a baseline and a level of responsibility, and it at least it makes me feel better anyway.
Right.
It makes me feel better, and sometimes that's really all that matters.
How long does it take you to go from we need this video to we have a video we can show people, like one of these 5 or 10 minute videos?
Oh, it's so much longer than you would think. It took me
my question I want to add to that too, actually, while you're thinking about it, is well, I guess you haven't reached this point yet, but are you concerned about having to redo them when there are changes, and how often do you anticipate that?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we did it structured the way that we did. One, yes, I do expect to redo pieces of them as things change, because my intention is for this to be annually required, so they have to repeat their training every year. And we're using the WordPress 101 video series for the actual WordPress training, and that gets updated for us on a regular basis, which is fantastic. So we couldn't have done this if we had to do WordPress training updates all the time. There's no way. I'd just been like, I'm out, I quit. No. But these core pieces, it's one of the reasons that I built this core this way, is there's a lot of this that doesn't change. Right? The tools might change, and how we suggest they contact us for support might change, but your accessibility basics, not really going to change, right? Not constantly. It's not a regular thing. If something like that changed, it would be a very big deal, and it would be worth doing a video for. But, writing for the web basics, not really going to change, So I worked really hard to make this kind of a sustainable thing as well, which is one of the reasons it's so kind of just icing on the cake of all of the knowledge that they could be getting. They're getting just the stuff that they need to do their day-to-day, and most of that stuff, most of the why, doesn't change.
All right. Last couple of minutes, just switching gears. Hi Edweb is coming up, and you are involved with that. Do you want to say a few things about that?
Hi Edweb. No pressure. Colin, if you see this, I'm sorry I wasn't ready. Hi Edweb is maybe actually it's not even a question. It's absolutely my favorite conference for higher education that we do, that I've ever been to, and I've been involved for a number of years. And it is really remarkable in that it covers everything. It covers all of the stuff that we do as far as like web and social media. It talks about marketing, and there are presentations that dig into everything from admissions to academic stuff to WordPress and plugins and advancement and all of that. But it's all done from like a practical standpoint, and how to do something, and here are where our outcomes, and it's all like one of the things I hate about Edweb every year is that I can't make it. It's not possible to get to all the sessions that you want to go to any given year. And the social interaction is phenomenal. They feed you constantly. It's always a good time, and I highly recommend for anyone who hasn't been, or anyone who has been, because then you know better than not going. So
I'm going to
totally be there.
I can't. The third year that I'm going, and I'm presenting on the making of a web team. So that's
super exciting. Go you.
I know. I can't wait to meet you in person.
I know. I'm presenting for the first time in a few years. I don't remember the last time I presented. It's been a while, but I'm a track co-chair, so you should come find me if you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll be there. I'll find you. Yeah. It's in Memphis, everybody.
It is in Memphis, and it's going to be amazing. And
tickets are still available. It's not too late. Everybody sign up. Go.
Oh yeah. I think early bird is over, right?
Yes,
but there's still it will sell out. This will sell out. Go get your registration.
Totally true.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to have all the links to all the materials we've been talking about at wpcampus.org/podcast. You want to plug anything else before we go?
I do, actually. I created a Facebook group, and there's a link in the presentation, but that is a group where I have links to all of the materials, and it kind of gives other people opportunities to kind of submit their materials and kind of talk about what they've done with the materials that I've kind of just put out there into the world, and it's really the space for the crowdsourcing of the stuff, and please do go tear apart what I've done and tell me how to do it better, and tell each other how to do it better, and tell us what you're doing with it and how it's working in your environment and all of those things. I really want to hear back from everyone.
Do we have that link? Can we put that link in the stuff?
Yeah, we'll put that link on the website as well.
Thank you.
All right. Lastly, just quick notes. The 2017 WP Campus hosting application is now available. So if you want your campus to be a WP campus, you can head to WPCampus.org and check that out. High Edweb is coming up, we talked about. Also, WordCamp Nashville and WordCamp Baltimore have higher ed tracks this year. I think the call for proposals have closed for both of those, but you should go if you're in the area. And as always, you can follow WP Campus and this podcast and everything affiliated with the organization at WPCampus.org on Twitter and WPCampus.org on the website. And if you have any ideas for future topics for the podcast, tweet it at WPCampus.org, tweet it at me. I'm Brian DeConinck. You probably don't know how to spell that, so tweet it at WPCampus.org. Any last thing either of you want to say?
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, this is good.
All right. Thank you, Shelley.